Yes, sir. The damage is right there, that little black blemish on the silver slide spiral.
And then let's go back, don't go there yet, don't go yet. All right, I'm sorry. Pull up the other image, all right? And let me see if I can zoom in. Thank you. I can't zoom in, but where my cursor is that the same location as the black, the blemish that you're talking about?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right, you can grab a seat. Thanks so much. Your Honor, this time we're going to publish Stage 108, which is the redacted interview with Miles Scott.
Okay.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions, and to have a lawyer with you during questioning. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you before any questioning if you wish. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you will still have the right to stop answering at any time. You also have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to a lawyer. You understand each of these rights are explained to you? Okay. Having these rights in mind, you wish to talk to us now? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, man. You go by Miles. Is it cool if I call you Miles, or you prefer to be called something else? Okay. All right. So, like I said, Miles, we got to talk about what happened out there at the QuikTrip, okay?
I don't say, and get this out of the way.
Okay. Go ahead.
I rented the Mercedes Benz, but I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't there. To whatever y'all talking about, I wasn't there. I wasn't there at the scene, none of that. I don't know what y'all talking about. But I do know about that Benz. I rented that Benz.
Okay.
For somebody.
So you rented the Mercedes.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that. Let's just start with that.
I don't remember.
A couple Fridays ago, does that sound right?
I guess.
Okay. So just tell me about that. You rented the Mercedes. What was the reason that you rented it?
I just needed to play around.
Okay. So how long did you have that car for?
I like a day.
A day?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you got it on a Friday, what? You're saying the next day you didn't have it anymore?
Mm.
Okay. What'd you do with it?
I had let somebody use it.
Who?
One of my partners.
Okay. And who was that?
I don't even know the real name.
What's his street name?
What do you call him?
Nickname?
Man.
What is it? Man?
Man.
Okay. So you said you let Man use it?
Yes.
Okay. What did Man do with it?
And he gave me 120. I ran a lot. I need the money back that I paid for it. So I had to let somebody use it.
Okay. And you don't know what he did with it after that?
No.
Okay. So tell me about what. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying I just met up with him goddamn later and got that shit back.
Okay. So tell me about what you did after you gave him the car. So you rented the car. You had it for a day. You gave it to Man. Tell me about your next couple days after that.
Yeah, after that, I turned it back in.
You turned it back in?
The next day,
Okay. How'd you get the car back?
I had to meet him on Covington Highway.
You met Man on Covington Highway?
Yes.
Was anybody with Man?
Yeah, some light skinned people. Some light skinned people.
Okay.
And then when you got the car, you went and returned it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where'd you return it?
I'm gonna say like Panola, I think.
Okay. Was it just you that went and returned it?
Me and
So you got it on Thursday. You kept it for a day, and then you gave it to Man the next day, so that was on Friday? What time on Friday?
it was early,
Like in the morning?
like 9, 10.
In the morning?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's what I mean, something.
So here's my only issue with that. You gave the car to Man Friday morning. So here you are at a Texaco in Atlanta on Lindbergh Drive with the car that Friday night. I'm sorry, Saturday morning. Saturday morning at about 1:30 a.m.
Yeah.
So you still had the car. So
Saturday.
Like that Saturday, early morning, like late Friday night, after midnight, early Saturday morning.
That's fine. I mean, you cannot remember it, but I'm telling
I
you.
remember wearing his outfit, but I don't remember.
Yeah. I'd say the dunks are nice. The off-whites. Yeah.
But I don't remember.
You were in the Mercedes, you were driving, okay? Because we both watched the video, okay? We saw the Mercedes pull up to the Texaco over there in Atlanta early Saturday morning after midnight, so Friday night going into Saturday. So after you're telling me that you already gave the car to this man dude, so you were there for like 30 minutes, y'all were out, you were looking at the car.
I ain't gonna cut, but I don't remember.
Okay.
You don't remember like the
I remember like
that's,
yeah,
that's
like,
fine.
You know what I'm saying? I remember.
But like, can we? I'm curious, like, cause y'all were looking like under the car. Like, what was going on with that? Do you remember? Like, did y'all run over something? Or,
drop it.
Drop the trans?
The gas thingy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because we saw y'all like looking under and driving, so that's what.
The
Gas cap? Gotcha.
And it just disappeared. Or I think mine.
So what you remember with this night? What did y'all do after?
I don't know, I think we went back to Lithonia. I think. But like, I ain't gonna count, I don't remember. Like, I remember this outfit though.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that outfit. I don't remember exactly what happened that night. I remember going back to Lithonia though. From wherever we was at.
So you went back to Lithonia, and then did what?
I don't know, I think we smoked and went to sleep. Or we fell asleep.
Okay. So when did you give this car to this man guy then?
I can't tell you what day, because I don't even remember what days this was wearing his outfit. I don't wear his outfit like 2-3 times after that.
All right. Well, so I'm telling you that was Friday night going into Saturday morning. So if you went back to Lithonia and smoked and went to sleep early Saturday morning, then that's Saturday. So what happened after that? You're saying you gave the car to this other guy, but I'm just trying to determine when that was. That's
So
all.
if you're saying we went to Lithonia, 9 times out of 10 I gave it to him after this. After when we went back to Lithonia, fell asleep, woke up, I seen him, and then I told him I had this set, and he just told him bring it back to me. And he brought it back to me.
What time did you bring it back to you?
I think I want to say like 2. Like 2. I think. I don't know, I remember returning the car back at like 3 something.
So, I'd like to direct your attention, who has previously been admitted into evidence, is 70A. Is this the photograph that you showed Miles Collins during the interview?
Yes, sir, it is.
Which he acknowledged that he recognized this was?
Yes, sir.
Let's show 70B. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. And that was a screenshot from the Texaco gas station that's previously been admitted as 68.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, let's talk about cell site location information and whether that's consistent with Mr. Collins' story. Did you have an opportunity to review the CSLI and the timing advance data for Mr. Collins' cell phone?
Yes, sir, I did.
And was that consistent with his story that he had given his card to a man?
No, sir, it was not.
In what way?
So in the interview with Mr. Collins, he, like he said, he gave the car to an individual that he only knew as Man, and that he wasn't at the QuikTrip that day. He had no knowledge of what I was talking about at the QuikTrip, that he was at his house in Lithonia off of Covington Highway. However, when we examined the cell site location information from Mr. Collins' phone, I was able to, and excuse me, I'm going to review just a few of my notes here so I make sure I get these times and dates right. On July 10th, 2022, which was the day of the homicide, Mr. Collins received a phone call at 11:23 a.m., and the cell site location information for that phone call showed that Mr. Collins' phone was in the area of Peachtree Corners, in the area of the QuikTrip at 5255 Peachtree Parkway. And the reason that that's significant is that that phone call was received, placing his phone in the area of the QuikTrip 3 minutes before that Mercedes was first captured on the flock camera pulling into the Forum Shopping Center, which specifically is not consistent with Mr. Collins' statement that he was not there that day, that he was at his house in Lithonia.
Okay. I'm going to publish State 68. It's camera 6. It's the camera 6 ending in 1500. Y'all had asked questions to Mr. Collins about looking under the car. And what was he looking in the car for in his statement?
He told us that they had dropped the gas cap, the fuel cap for the Mercedes, and that they were looking for it under the vehicle.
Okay, I paused the video. It's on the video as 134:04. And did you see Mr. Collins look in the car?
Yes, sir, I did.
Thank you. All right. Did you have an opportunity to review the cell phone messages between Mr. Collins and Jeremiah Pledger?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And by the way, before I move to those, let me just, that Texaco video, how many hours was it before the homicide of Bradley Coleman?
That Texaco footage was July 9th from 1:17 a.m. to 1:43 a.m. The homicide occurred July 10th at 12:38 p.m. So approximately close to 24 hours.
So immediately after the homicide, I believe that you've talked about cell phone extractions, and we do have the evidence in the record of Jeremiah Pledger and Mr. Collins is texting one another. Were there texts that were significant to you as a detective?
Yes, sir, there were.
What were they?
So when I reviewed the forensic examination of Ms. Pledger's phone, the very first, when you go into the messages, just like I'm sure on any of your phones, you'll see the most recent text message thread. The most recent text message thread was with an individual that she had saved in her phone as Miles. She had that individual saved under the phone number 678-542-6398, which we were able to associate as being associated with Miles Collins. In the messages, the first message that I saw was, and again, I'm going to refer to my notes if that's okay, just so I get this right. July 10th, 2022 at 12:54 p.m., Collins sent a message to Pledger that read, "Can you try to hurry up? I got to turn this car in." Collins then sent another message at 1:04 p.m. that read, "Turnberry Place, Lithonia." And at 1:32 p.m., Collins sent a message that said, "Okay, and this my exact location." And at that time, Collins shared his Apple Maps location, which if you're familiar with that, when you're in Apple Maps, you can just share it, and it'll share your location based on the GPS data of where your phone, your device is at that time. So Collins shared his Apple Maps location, which showed him to be at Creekside Corners Apartments. That was at 1:32 p.m. And then on July 10th, 2022 at 1:04 p.m., Pledger received a text message from David Booker's phone, and that phone number was 470-342-9346, and that text message read 11109 Turnberry Place, Lithonia.
Is that address significant?
Yes, sir. That was the address for Creekside Corners Apartments Complex, and that was the apartment complex that the Mercedes was returned to Zarek Reynolds later that afternoon or shortly that after.
Thank you, Detective. No further questions.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Judge. Detective Harrison, good morning, still morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Obviously, you and I have spoken before this case, other cases. If I ask you a question you don't understand, you just let me know, and then I'll try to rephrase it, all right?
Yes, sir. I understand.
Okay, let me start here. You indicated that slider crimes have been happening for about 20 years. Is that right?
No, that wasn't specifically what I said. I said that push-to-start ignitions have been around in vehicles for approximately 20 years. I know I think Dodge Chargers started implementing them around approximately 2007. What I said was the push-to-start ignitions have been around for close to 20 years based on that, and that as slider crimes became more prolific, that many auto manufacturers changed the technology associated with those push-to-start ignitions.
All right, you've been in law enforcement for about 20 years, is that right?
14 years.
Fantastic. That term slider is relatively new, less than 5 years old. Is that fair to say?
I don't know specifically how long we've been using that term. I was assigned to the Criminal Investigations Division, to the General Crimes Unit that I spoke about, the Property Crimes Unit, where I first got most of my experience investigating slider crimes in 2019. So I have most of my relevant experience investigating slider crimes over the course of the last 5 years. As far as how long the term has been commonly used in law enforcement, I'm really not sure about that.
All right, and we obviously know the crime existed, but the frequency of the crime to the point that it's given a name, you don't know that law enforcement was referring to it as slider crimes before 2019. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
You were the lead detective on this case?
Yes, sir.
Were there any fingerprints or DNA recovered from the QT that related back to David Booker?
No, sir.
You had a chance to interview David Booker, is that right?
No, sir. I did not personally interview David Booker. He was interviewed by Sergeant Jorstad and Sergeant York.
Fantastic. And the same way you viewed that QT video about 1,000 times, you had a chance to also review David Booker's interview. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in his interview, David Booker denied being present at the QT where the shooting occurred. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
He was also shown a still photo from the Texaco and denied that was him also. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
When did you learn his date of birth, David Booker's?
When the photograph of the identification card was provided to me from Lazarick Fielder, I got the date of birth off of the driver's license.
Okay, did you confirm if that date of birth was correct on the Georgia identification card?
Yes, sir. Once I received the Georgia identification card, one of the first things I did was run the information on that card, the name, date of birth, identification number through GCIC to verify that it was a valid driver's or identification card and that I did get a valid return matching the information that was displayed on the identification card.
Fantastic. And you also took warrants for David Booker, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Seven.
I'm going to show you what's going to be marked D7.
And I'm going to ask you if you recognize what D7 is.
Yes, sir. I recognize it.
All right, it's a photocopy of one of the charges, specifically the search warrant against David Booker, is that right?
This is the arrest warrant for one of the charges, yes, sir.
The arrest warrant, got you. The date of birth on the arrest warrant, what's the date of birth on the arrest warrant for David Booker?
09/27/2001.
September 27, 2001, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. David was arrested, let me ask this question. Was David arrested before you prepared the search warrant, or was David arrested after you prepared the arrest warrant? Was David arrested before you prepared the arrest warrant or after you prepared the arrest warrant?
He was arrested after the arrest warrant was issued by a judge.
Okay, and David was arrested on what day?
I do not recall the exact day that he was arrested. I believe it was July 20th. I was out of town on the day that he was arrested. I didn't participate in that. So I think it was July 20th, 2022, but I may be wrong about that.
That's fine. So as best as you can tell, as the lead detective, David was arrested about 10 days after the shooting. Is that right?
Approximately, yes, sir.
Okay. I want to make sure I have this right. The video at the Texaco, where the folks are looking underneath the Mercedes for the gas cap, that's about 36 hours prior to the shooting at QT. Is that right? We could take our time. That's important. I don't want to be, because I know it's the day before, numerically, right?
Yes, sir. I misspoke previously. I said approximately 24 hours, but you would be correct. It would be closer to 36 hours after the Texaco footage.
I got you. You thought that, based on your review of the QT video, that there might have been a toll reader on the Mercedes. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever have a chance to look at the Mercedes?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, when you located the Mercedes, what was the plate on the Mercedes?
It was C as in Charlie, V as in Victor, 90487, and that was out of the state of Illinois.
Illinois plate. And you had a chance to look at the Mercedes when? In relationship to the homicide? 2 days later, a week later?
It was recovered several days after. I don't have the exact date that it was recovered. It was recovered, I believe, within 2 or 3 days of the homicide.
I got you. Did you take photos of the Mercedes when you recovered it?
Our crime scene personnel took photographs when we executed the search warrant on it.
And what you described to the jury as a toll reader, what was it actually? Was it a toll reader?
Yes, sir. It was a toll reader that we located when we executed the search warrant on the vehicle. It was located on the windshield, consistent with what I observed in the QuikTrip surveillance footage.
Was it an active toll reader or expired toll reader?
I'm not sure as to the status of it.
But it was a toll reader, as best you could tell, that wasn't operational in Georgia. Is that right?
I don't know for sure. I'm mostly just familiar with the Peach Pass Lane here in the metro Atlanta area. I know we have some other toll roads that I don't personally travel. I'm not sure if that particular toll reader can be used with any of our toll roads here in Georgia.
So as best you could tell, it definitely wasn't a Peach Pass. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. I would agree with that.
I got you. I want to ask you about the QT. It's at 5255. Give me the street name again.
Peachtree Parkway.
Peachtree Parkway. Are there any flock cameras going south on Peachtree Parkway from the QT where the shooting occurred?
I don't recall if there were any additional flock cameras going south past the QuikTrip. I know there were going northbound.
Okay. Did you see the vehicle, the Mercedes with the Illinois plate? Was it captured going northbound on Peachtree Parkway at some time prior to the shooting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it was captured where?
It was captured at Spalding Drive and Peachtree Parkway, heading in the direction of the QuikTrip.
And that was at what time?
That was at, again, I'm going to refer to my notes so I don't get it wrong. That was captured, the Mercedes was captured by camera number 49 at Spalding Drive and Peachtree Parkway, heading towards the QuikTrip on July 10th, 2022 at 11:53 a.m.
11:53 a.m. And the shooting occurred about 12:35 p.m., is that right?
12:38.
12:38 p.m. So it was about 45 minutes in between the last flock camera and the shooting. Is that fair to say?
Approximately.
I got you. Is it fair to say that no flock camera captures the Illinois Mercedes? You know what I mean by that, right? The Mercedes with the Illinois plate that you believe was the getaway vehicle. Is it fair to say that there were no flock cameras that caught that vehicle after it exited the QT?
Are you asking about like a specific time frame? Was it captured after that?
Anytime after the shooting was the Mercedes with the Illinois license plate captured on flock camera?
Yes, it was.
Where, and at what time?
I'm sorry, no. Well, yes, it was. I don't have the date and time that it was captured on a flock camera. It was later captured on a flock camera, which ultimately led to us recovering that vehicle. There was a couple of days where we didn't receive any flock hits for that vehicle, but it eventually went mobile again, and that's what ultimately led to the recovery of it in Clayton County.
Okay, so as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing that there may have been a day or days in between the shooting and the next time that the Mercedes was captured on the flock camera?
Yes, sir.
All right. I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Clegg?
Yes, thank you, Your Detective Harrison, I just have a few questions for you, sir.
You began your testimony by talking about slider crimes, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you had actually worked in the General Detective Division, and pursuant to that responsibility, you would have had occasion to investigate a number of slider crimes. Is that a fair statement, sir?
Yes, sir.
Slider crimes are, for the most part, based on your experience, non-confrontational. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. They intend to commit the crime without the victim knowing that it's occurring.
The idea behind the slider crime is for whomever is stealing a car to get in the car unbeknownst to the owner of the car, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the idea is to get away before the victim is actually aware that the individual has gained control of their car, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you've had occasion to investigate how many slider crimes would you say?
I don't know the specific number. I investigated numerous ones when I was in the general crimes unit. Most of those, like I said earlier, pertain to entering autos where they were typically trying to steal property from inside the vehicle, maybe get inside the vehicle and take somebody's purse while they were pumping gas. And then I investigated numerous other ones in the robbery unit that were investigated more along the lines of carjackings.
But not specifically talking about a carjacking, but talking about slider crimes, typically because they are done by stealth, a weapon is not exhibited, correct?
Typically, in a traditional slider crime, yes.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to get in the car, get away from the scene without the victim even knowing what was happening, correct?
Yes, sir.
The idea is to not present a weapon to the victim, correct?
I would agree with that.
Okay. Now, you basically, do you recall specifically what time the 911 call came in reporting the incident at the QT?
I do not.
It would have been shortly after 12:38. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The surveillance video showed that the shooting occurred right at 12:38 p.m., so I would expect the 911 call to be sometime shortly thereafter.
And there was some folks at the QT who actually made the 911 calls, correct?
Yes, sir.
There was a gentleman across the street who has testified in this trial. I believe his name was Owen Waits. He made a 911 call, did he not?
I believe so. I don't recall the names of every individual. There were numerous people that made the 911 call that were not on scene when I arrived that I didn't speak to personally.
And you had an opportunity to interview a number of these folks while you were at the scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
How many civilians did you interview who observed something that had occurred at the QT?
I personally interviewed 2 civilians at the QuikTrip. Only one of them actually observed the incident itself. The other one, she arrived after the victim was already lying on the ground.
Were there other individuals who you didn't necessarily interview yourself, but who were interviewed by representatives of the Gwinnett County Police Department?
I believe a few of the initial callers may have been interviewed by patrol officers when they first arrived, but they were not on scene when I got there. I'm not 100% certain on that.
That's fine, sir. And sometime, do you recall the approximate number of civilian witnesses who were interviewed at or about the QuikTrip back on July the 10th of 2022 by any representative of the police department, sir?
I do not. All I can testify to confidently is the number of witnesses that I personally interviewed.
One of the people interviewed was a gentleman by the name of Stanislav Volkanov. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I believe it was pronounced Stanislav Volkanov.
Whomever.
Pretty close.
Bottom line is, he was an individual who was driving a BMW on that day, correct?
Yes, sir.
You have watched the video, you may be a tad hyperbolic, but you said about 1,000 times, right?
It's been a lot.
Okay, fair enough, sir. And you can see a BMW in the video, correct?
Yes, sir.
What transpires when you see the video and see the BMW is that when the Dodge Charger is starting to back out, it hits the BMW, correct?
Yes, sir.
That was the vehicle being driven by, I'm going to refer to him by his first name since I'll butcher his last name, Stanislav, correct?
Correct.
He would have been the closest civilian witness to the actual incident when it began, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you actually took a recorded statement from him, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
He was able to give you a partial description of a license plate of the Mercedes, correct?
A partial description, yes.
He was not able to give you a tag number, correct?
That's correct.
And just so we all understand each other, when you looked at that video numerous time after time after time, you never could specifically identify a tag number, could you?
No, sir, not from the video.
Now, you looked at it and thought, this license plate appears to be out of state, correct?
That was a combination of both my personal observations as well as the statement that I received from Mr. Volkanov when I interviewed him.
And he described the license plate as having some sort of blue in it, correct?
Yes, sir. He was confident that it was an out-of-state tag and that it had blue on the license plate.
And specifically, he referenced the state of Kansas in his statement to you, did he not?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, did you also interview, hold on a second. Now, there was one shell casing at the scene, right?
Yes, sir.
That shell casing was outside, correct?
Yes, sir.
You would have had occasion to examine the interior of the Dodge Charger, correct?
Correct.
There were no shell casings found inside the interior of the Dodge Charger, were there?
No, sir.
That would be consistent with no shots having been fired inside of the Dodge Charger, correct?
Not necessarily. I would not be able to make that determination based solely on the location of a fired cartridge casing, no, sir.
Based on your interview of witnesses who were present, based on the interview of, not necessarily your interview, but police interviews of witnesses present, and lack of damage to the interior of the car, you found no evidence to suggest that any shots were fired inside the car, correct? And when I say the car, I mean the Charger, right?
Correct. I would agree and acknowledge that I did not find any evidence that there was a shot fired inside the car. All I was trying to clarify is that based on the location of the shell casing alone, I couldn't make that determination.
And the bottom line was there was no blood found inside the Dodge Charger, correct?
I don't recall there being any blood found in the Dodge Charger, but I'm not 100% certain.
Now, did the Dodge Charger have a center console?
I believe it did.
Now, when we first see the Dodge Charger depicted in the video at the QuikTrip, the driver's side door is closed, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the passenger side door is closed, correct?
I don't remember. I don't know if I could tell if the passenger side door was closed or not based on the location, based on how it was parked, because the surveillance footage was at an angle from the driver's side, and I honestly don't remember if the passenger side was closed or open.
Do you recall when the Dodge Charger was beginning to back up and wound up striking the BMW, whether the passenger side door would have been open or closed?
So the passenger side door was open at some point when Mr. Coleman entered the vehicle, but again, the surveillance footage, it's not entirely clear what is going on the passenger side of the vehicle based on the angle.
Is it fair to say that based on your observations of the video that Mr. Coleman did not enter the vehicle or open the passenger side door until the car had actually moved?
Yes, I would agree with that.
So the car was in the process of pulling away, apparently before Mr. Coleman knew what was happening, correct?
Yeah, based on the video, it appeared that the vehicle, and I say the vehicle, the Dodge Charger started to back up. Once it struck the BMW behind it, that's when I could see the altercation taking place inside the vehicle. As far as exactly which moment Mr. Coleman entered the vehicle, whether it was after it struck the Mercedes or if he, obviously I don't know what Mr. Coleman observed. I don't know if Mr. Coleman noticed that the vehicle had begun moving prior to it striking the Mercedes. I just know that after the Dodge Charger struck the Mercedes, at that point I was able to see an altercation taking place inside the vehicle.
And just so we're clear, the Dodge Charger never struck the Mercedes, did it?
I'm sorry, I misspoke. The BMW. It struck the BMW.
Now, the evidence, it appeared that Mr. Coleman was putting air in his tires, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell from looking at the video whether he was putting air on the passenger side, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell whether he was putting air on the passenger side front tire or the passenger side back tire?
No, sir, I couldn't determine that.
Okay. Now, when you arrived at the scene, was the Dodge Charger still running?
I don't remember.
Do you know, based on your own investigation, whether when Mr. Coleman was putting air in the tires, whether the Charger was running or not?
I do not know if the car was running at the time he was putting air in his tires.
Now, it did have a push-button start, the Dodge Charger, correct?
Yes, sir.
And a Dodge Charger is who's fooling who, a badass car, right?
That's a matter of opinion.
You're not necessarily disagreeing with that, is that a fair statement?
I'm not personally a fan of them, but like I said, it's a opinion.
And when, there's something called, you see Dodge ads on occasion, and there are a couple, there's one ad, I haven't seen it in a while, but there's two yahoos talking about a Dodge having a Hemi, whatever on earth a Hemi is. Do you know whether this Dodge Charger had a Hemi?
I don't remember the specific engine that was in this vehicle, no.
Do you know whether this particular vehicle would have caused or would have resulted in a noise being generated when you pushed the button to start the car?
When you say, would it generate
To start the car, to ignite the car's gonna make a noise, right?
Yeah, I would expect that you would hear the normal sound of an engine starting and turning over when you push the ignition.
I mean, the Dodge Charger was not a hybrid or electric vehicle, was it not?
It was not a hybrid or electric.
Okay, so that, if the car was stopped or had been turned off, and then someone pushed the button to start it, it would result in a noise, right?
Yes, sir.
That noise would be apparent to someone who was in very close proximity to the car, correct?
Possibly.
Mr. Coleman would have been in very close proximity to the car at that time, correct?
That's correct.
Obviously, if he's putting air in his front passenger side tire, it would be, he'd be right next to the engine, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, again, we don't know what alerts his attention as to the car moving, but obviously when the car strikes another car, it's going to cause a noise as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there is in fact a collision, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you see damage to the Dodge Charger, however minimal it might have been?
I honestly don't recall.
You don't recall? And did you see damage to Stanislav's car, the BMW, if you recall?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, Mr. Coleman was a big guy, right?
I don't recall his exact height and weight. I mean, he was larger than me.
I mean, you didn't measure his body, but I mean, he was a tall, big guy, right?
I would say he was tall.
Okay, and he got in the passenger side of the car, correct?
Yes, sir.
He got in the front seat of the passenger side of the car, correct?
Yes, sir.
He ultimately wound up coming out on the driver's side of the car, correct?
Correct.
He would have had to come over the center console, would he not?
Yes, sir.
His holster which I think has been admitted into evidence and which you identified, perhaps one of those items you have right there, was found inside the car, right?
Yes, sir.
It was found where inside the car?
I believe it was located on the passenger side floorboard.
And would it have been on the seat, on the floorboard, if you recall, sir?
I'm pretty sure that the holster was located on the passenger side floorboard.
Okay, I'm sorry, you may have just said that, I apologize. Okay, so the bottom line is, you say you can see some sort of struggle or confrontation taking place inside the car, right?
Yes, sir.
And can you see, and you can't see all that much inside the car, but you can see something going on, right?
Yes, sir.
You can tell there are two people inside the car, right?
Honestly, you can't tell how many people are inside the car. I made an inference based on seeing one of the suspects enter the vehicle, seeing Mr. Coleman enter the vehicle. There was nobody else on scene at the time that we arrived, so that was an assumption that I made, but you can't actually see well enough inside the vehicle to say for sure that there wasn't anybody else in the vehicle.
The windows of that particular vehicle tinted, and when I say that vehicle, I mean the Charger.
I believe so.
Okay, but the bottom line is, whatever struggle takes place, how long does that struggle go on for?
Seconds.
Seconds. And then the individuals come out of the car, correct?
Yes, sir.
The individual who is attempting to steal the car comes out first, right?
Yeah, I believe so. They kind of came out simultaneously, but the individual that was attempting to steal the car was closer to, if you're watching the QuikTrip footage, was closer to you, so that's probably fairly accurate.
That person would have been in the driver's seat, correct?
They came out the driver's side.
Yeah, fair enough, okay. Now, Mr. Hewley made a statement, correct?
Yes, sir.
And indicated he was trying to get away from Mr. Coleman, correct?
Yes, sir.
Use Mr. Coleman's name, but specifically said, "I'm trying to get away," right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hewley made no statement about having his gun out inside the car, did he?
No.
He repeatedly told you during the course of that interview, "I was trying to get away and I was trying to convey that fact to Mr. Coleman," correct?
Correct.
Is there any, there is, based on your observation, could you tell whether Mr. Coleman came out of the car on his own on the driver's side or whether he was pulled out of the car?
So when I reviewed the surveillance footage, it appeared to me that he was pulled out of the vehicle. Again, that's my observation based on what I was seeing. I believe that he was pulled out of the vehicle. I understand that Mr. Hewley made a statement to the contrary of that in the interview, but if you're asking me what my opinion was based on my observations, it looked like he was pulled out of the vehicle.
If Mr. Hewley pulled that individual, Mr. Coleman, out of the car, he would have probably, given the size of Mr. Coleman, needed to use both hands, correct?
Just depends on the strength of the individuals that are involved.
Well, it would be much easier to do it with two hands than one, correct?
Correct.
If Mr. Hewley had a gun in his hand at the time, it would have made it more difficult for him to pull Mr. Coleman out of the car, correct?
Possibly.
Okay. And you could not see, looking at the video, whether or not Mr. Hewley had a gun in his hand when he first got out of the car, correct?
I couldn't make that determination one way or the other at that time.
Okay. Could you tell whether or not, excuse me, could you tell whether or not Mr. Coleman had a gun in his hand when he got out of the car?
No, sir, I could not tell.
Okay. But he had a holster inside the car, right?
Correct.
This is a dumb question, and everybody knows the answer, but I'll ask it nonetheless. A holster is an item in which you carry a gun, right?
Yes, sir.
So it is reasonable to infer that Mr. Coleman, one, either had the gun on his person when he was outside putting his hair in his tires, or took the gun out of the holster while he was inside the car struggling with whomever. Fair enough?
I don't know that I would say that he either had it in his pants outside or he had it on him when he was outside putting air in the tires. And the reason that I'm saying that is based on the statement that was provided by Mr. Hewley, that when he got into the vehicle, he observed the firearm on the passenger seat of the Dodge Charger. As far as making a determination or an inference as to whether or not Mr. Coleman pulled the firearm out of the holster inside the vehicle, I don't know, because like I already said, I can't tell exactly what's going on inside the vehicle other than there's an altercation taking place. There was some sort of a struggle. Whether there was a struggle over that firearm inside the vehicle, again, I don't know. For all I know, Mr. Hewley pulled that firearm out of the holster. I don't know.
Simply don't know. Okay, but the bottom line is when they got outside of the car is when the shot was fired, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Coleman was approximately 8 to 10 feet, maybe even a little further from the driver's side of his own car, right?
Thereabout. Again, as far as exact measurements, I don't know. They were fairly close. I would say probably 10, 15 feet would be my guess based on what I remember.
In that 10 to 15 feet, based on your recollection, there was no blood from the driver's side door until you got to his body, right?
So the thing about the thing about the blood that I recall from the scene is obviously there was a very large pool of blood, as I'm sure you saw in the crime scene photos. The parking lot slightly ran downhill, so there was a large pool of blood next to Mr. Coleman's body, but there was also blood that had begun running downhill in the direction of the Charger. So it depends on what kind of blood pattern you're asking me about.
Okay, there was blood that seemed to come from his body after it had been on the ground, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but as far as having been shot until he got to the actual location where his body was, there is no indication that, well, was there a struggle outside of the car prior to him getting shot?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and could